In the introduction to this course, I did mention that we have one unit dedicated to digital literacy, and this is it. Unit 5 addresses the changing nature of communication and examines the changed and changing nature of language due to the existence and use of ICT tools. According to UNESCO, digital literacy is the ability to find, access, manage, integrate, communicate, evaluate and create information safely and appropriately through digital technologies and network devices for participation in economic and social life. Digital literacy is not just about taking a selfie of your new haircut for an Instagram post, tweeting about the newest chai adda or pizza joint, or commenting on someone's Facebook post on the last cricket match. It requires one to know when to use what technology tool and how best to use a specific tool for which purpose and with what type of audience. Teaching digital literacy skills is important since digital literacy is essential to succeed in personal, social, academic and professional lives. In your daily life, in college or outside, digital is most probably your preferred source of information and communication. When you enter the professional world, digital is going to be your medium of communication, interaction and work output. Unit 5 on digital literacy presents 4 modules that cover a wide range of digital literacy skills. In Module 1, Writing for Newspapers versus Social Media, we have 2 experts sharing with you their experience working with the print and digital media. The module starts with Professor Upendran Subramanian. Professor S. Upendran taught at EFL University, Hyderabad and earlier CIFL, Central Institute of English and Foreign Languages, for 37 years. He was a member of the Department of Materials Development, Testing and Evaluation, School of English Language Education, and before that worked extensively on radio and TV production. He is also a columnist, continuing the 40-year-old column Know Your English in the newspaper The Hindu for the last 30 years. And is a blogger. You can find his blog at Upendran's KYE. The link is also shared in the worksheet. In this module, Professor Upendran talks about the changing nature of language and how writing a newspaper article differs from writing a blog post. In the next part of this module, we have Professor T.T. Srikumar. Professor Srikumar works in the Department of Communication, School of Interdisciplinary Studies at the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. He also serves as the Director of EMMRC at EFL University, Hyderabad. Drawing on his experience as a columnist for Madhyamam, a Malayalam newspaper, and as a Facebook enthusiast, Professor Srikumar addresses the differences between writing a newspaper column and creating social media posts.
That is what my father used to say when I was young. He used to say, you don't know how to write. So I think that every generation looks down on the writing of the next generation. They think, oh, you don't know how to write. And during my time, what everyone looked at was not just the content, they looked at the grammar, the spelling, punctuation, all these things. And if they didn't look good, then you were considered to be a bad writer. But nowadays, because of the SMS language that kids use, there are more reasons for people of your generation and my generation to say, kids today have no clue about how to write, because they find that the use of SMS language, for example, seriously becomes SRSLY. So what is this? What kind of spelling is this? But the thing is, this is how writing started. If you go back and look at the history of writing, you'll find that in many forms of writing, vowels were not included. You had just the consonants, and it was up to the reader to determine what the vowels were that went into that word. And the context usually suggested what the word was. So when we read SMS messages today, although they don't contain all the vowels, we're able to figure out what the words are. And that is the beauty of language. You don't have to write everything. Think about when you were a student. When you were taking notes in class, you didn't write all the words and include all the letters of the words. You made use of shortcuts, so language became LG, chemistry became CHEM. You were doing that all the time, and that's all these kids are doing today when they are sending messages. Unfortunately, what is happening now is, because they are using this language frequently to send messages, what they're doing is they're also using the same style in their formal styles of writing. So instead of to, they'll put a to. Instead of FOR, they'll put the numerical for. And this is something that teachers don't want to see in any piece of writing. So as far as I'm concerned, complaints have always been there, and they will continue to be there. Well, if you look at the history of writing, one of the things that you will find is technology has had an impact on writing. Take, for example, one of the biggest inventions of mankind, namely the printing press. Now, before the printing press came into being, books were basically written by the clerics, the clergy. And when I say books were written, it's not as if the members of the clergy were producing something new. All that they were doing was reproducing copies of the Bible. And it took them a long time to produce one book, because these books were illustrated, written in beautiful handwriting, and they had all kinds of drawings. Therefore, it took a long time, and because it took a long time, very few people had copies of the Bible with them. Only the rich could afford these books that the clergy were writing. When the printing press came into being, then what happened was everyone managed to get a copy of the Bible, because books became cheap. And when the printing press came into being, several things happened to the language. The first thing that happened was it standardized spelling. Before the advent of the printing press, people spelt words any which way they could. Even somebody like Shakespeare spelt his own name 4 or 5 different ways. So when printing came into being, what happened was people took stock of this and said, okay, we need to spell words in a systematic way. This didn't happen overnight, but over a course of time, spelling became standardized. Another thing that happened because of the printing press was the standardization of punctuation. Now, before punctuation came into being, there were no full stops, there were no commas. Therefore, when you read a paragraph, you didn't know where a sentence started, where a sentence ended. So you had to read the same sentence 2 or 3 times to figure out what was happening. But when the press came into being, people once again said, okay, let's have a set of rules as far as punctuation is concerned. And one of the strange things that happened was, English is one of the few languages where the personal pronoun I is capitalized no matter where it occurs. For example, whether it occurs in the middle of the sentence, it's still a capital I. If it occurs at the beginning, it's still a capital I. So why is it that it's only in English that this personal pronoun is capitalized? The answer is fairly simple. It all happened because of the printing press. When the word I was adopted into Old English, it was pronounced the same way as the German ich, I-C-H. But over a period of time, what happened was the ICH changed to IC, and then later it just became I. And this I was not capitalized. So what happened was, you had a single letter word in the middle of a sentence, and English has no other word which has just one letter. And because of this single letter in the middle of the sentence, people in the printing press didn't know whether to include it as part of the previous word or include it as part of the next word. And this created confusion, and when they did add the I to the previous word or the word following it, it created a new word, resulting in problems for the reader. So for example, if it's I come and you add the I to the come, you get ikome. You don't know how to read it because you've never come across this word. So as a result, to avoid this problem of linking the I with the previous or the following word, one of the things that the printers decided to do was to capitalize the I no matter where it came, whether it came at the beginning of the sentence or at the middle of a sentence. And that's why English is perhaps the only language where I is capitalized when it occurs even in the middle of a sentence, because in most other languages, especially European languages, the word I consists of more than one letter. So that's how the introduction of the printing press changed the way we wrote. The next big invention, of course, was the telegraph. And the telegraph brought about a change as far as the brevity or the shortness of the message was concerned. Before the telegraph came, newspaper writers were basically focused on local news. And if they had to write about news that was taking place in other parts of the country or world, they had to wait for the report to come in, and that took time. So by the time a report of something happening in another part of the country came, it was already several days old. But when the telegraph came, it became possible for reporters to report on matters immediately. And in those days, reporters wrote as if they were writing a piece of literature. So they had this longish introduction before they actually dealt with the news that they were supposed to deal with. So what happened? When you wrote your piece and went to the telegraph office, suppose your report was 4 or 5 pages long, when you handed in your report, it took the telegraph operator several hours to send that message. And if an important piece of news was happening, you would have several reporters waiting in line to send their piece of news as well. But because people were writing lengthy reports and the telegraph operator took time to send each report, very often only 1 or 2 reports of a newspaper could be sent. The reporters from other newspapers were not able to send their report because the telegraph office closed. So when they found this happening, what the telegraph office did was they said, okay, from now on, the entire report is not going to be sent. What we're going to do is give each reporter 10 minutes to send his report. So every individual got only 10 minutes. So what the newspaper reporters started doing was, in the very first paragraph, they gave you the gist of the story. They told you about who, what, when, where, how, what are the things that happened. The first paragraph answered that question: who, what, when, where, how. And this style of writing continues even today. If you look at a newspaper article, it tells you where something happened, what happened, who was involved, and how it happened. And this style of writing is called the inverted pyramid style. So the newspaper writing changed as well. Once you finished writing your first paragraph and it had been sent, you went back, the reporter went back, stood at the back of the line again so that the second paragraph could be sent. So he was sending his message paragraph by paragraph, and the good thing was every reporter got a chance to send some part of his report to his newspaper. So as far as the telegraph is concerned, it made people write very crisply. After the invention of the telegraph, I think the other big invention is perhaps the computer, because now you could write any which way you want, and you could write about anything you wanted to. For example, if you think about the blog, I can write about anything that I want as long as it doesn't hurt anybody's sentiment. So I've been writing a blog for 2 years, and I've been writing about things like, why is I capitalized in English even when it occurs in the middle of a sentence? Or sometimes I write about myself. The thing about the blog, what's wonderful about the blog is everything is under your control. You are the master of what it is that you're going to create. And it's not just the text that you're worried about. See, yes, you want people to read your blog, so you write something nice. But it's not just the text. You think about, okay, what are the visuals that I can use? Can I use a film clipping here? Can I use a song there? So you have so many different things to think about. Whereas if you're writing for a newspaper, all that you're worried about is the text. You say, okay, does it read well? Does it make sense? And are there any mistakes? And if the answer to those questions are yes, yes, and no, you're happy and you send it away. But in the case of your blog, you are in control from beginning to end. You are the master of your creation, and that's the fun aspect, because you're not thinking about the text immediately. Sometimes you think about the text and you worry about the pictures or the photograph or the audio that you could possibly use to make it much more interesting. But sometimes you start with the photograph or the audio, and very often these photographs and the audio give you ideas how to go about writing the blog. So it's not just the text, but every other thing that forms a part of the blog. For example, as I said, the text, the pictures, the audio, all these things begin to play an important role. So you begin to consider about what are the other things, or what are the things that I can use to make this a lot more interesting. And the fun thing about writing a blog, as I said, is you can write about whatever you want. One of the things that I've realized about blogging is, yes, there will be people interested in reading your blog. But what I found is that it's like the telegraph, in the sense that if your blog runs into several pages, then you're not going to get too many hits. Not many people are going to read it, because people nowadays want to read materials that can be read in a minute or 5 minutes. That's it. Anything more, there will not be too many takers for that particular blog. So if you're writing a blog, keep it short. Yeah, one of the things that's happening now because of the introduction of computers and the internet is that we have the coining of a lot of new words. All right, take for example the word selfie. It didn't exist, say 15 years ago, but now everyone in the world knows what a selfie is. And the interesting thing about this word is that you don't have people translating it into their mother tongue. A selfie is a word that is universal now. And you have a word like tweet. 10 or 15 years ago, if you came across this word, you immediately thought about birds, because birds tweet. But now, as soon as you hear the word tweet, birds are the last thing that come to your mind. It's about the Twitter account, sending messages to people. And this shows how the words take over your life. Tweet now means sending messages. And then you have a word like unlike. Years ago, the word basically meant very different. He's unlike his father. That's what it meant, very different. But now, if you go on Facebook or any of these accounts and unlike a person, that means you don't like him. The meaning of the word has changed completely. Similarly, you can unfriend someone, something that you couldn't do before the existence of Facebook. Now, these changes have happened not just in the case of words, but also we have a lot of these idiomatic expressions in English. For example, there is the expression to give someone the cold shoulder. It means to ignore someone. But now, with the introduction of the digital media, you have something called to give someone the cold finger. What does that mean? It means when you get a text and you wish to ignore the text, you don't want to respond to what the person has said, you don't send a message. And how do you send a message? By using your finger. So if you give someone a cold finger, what it means is to ignore someone, not send a message to someone. And then earlier we had this expression, slip of the tongue. If you made a mistake, you say, oh, that was slip of the tongue. So I'm talking to my wife and I say, oh, I love you. And if her name happens to be Usha, you say, I love you, Usha, but unfortunately you use some other name. Then you say, oh, that was a slip of the tongue. Don't worry, that was a slip of the tongue. Now we have another expression. Very often we type out a message, but unfortunately we send it to the wrong person. And when the message is sent to a wrong person, it's called a slip of the thumb. Not the tongue, but the slip of the thumb, because you make use of your thumb to send messages. We have a lot of people who only read bad news, and they come and tell you all the bad news there is. Such people are called doom scrollers. They look for messages or news which suggest that the world is coming to an end, and they will forward these messages to make our life miserable as well. We all talk about cyberspace. I'll see you in cyberspace. I met him in cyberspace. The meeting happened in cyberspace. But what about face-to-face meeting? That should have some space, right? And there is a word for that. It is called meet space. But it's not M-E-E-T, but M-E-A-T, meet space, because you're meeting in the flesh. Okay, you're meeting in the flesh. And so there are lots of words emerging, words being coined, and that is the fun of language. It changes all the time, and new words are created all the time. How many of these will survive, say 15 or 20 years from now? God knows. But the thing is, what is interesting to note is they are being coined now, and when you see such words, it makes you feel happy. It brings a smile to the face. There is one thing that I'd like to say before I end, and that is, when the digital media came into being, people said, this is the end of going to school. There is no need to go to school. People can stay at home and sit in front of their monitor and learn, which means we don't need school buildings, and all the additional expenditure, we don't need all that. Learning will take place in cyberspace. And a lot of people believe that this could happen. And the good thing about COVID, what it taught us is it is not going to happen. Learning, sitting at home, is not anything that people want to do. It's not just the kids who hated learning online, even adults hated it. So you will be going to school, you will be going to college, and you will have people like me standing in front of you and talking to you. So no cyberspace. We will be meeting in meet space.